Humans die far too easily. They fall from ladders, they choke on chicken bones, they crash their primitive vehicles while staring at glowing rectangles. Their fragility is their defining trait, and for centuries we have laughed at their endless ability to end themselves. I myself once declared that humanity's greatest invention was not the combustion engine or nuclear fire, but their strange tape that fixes everything and nothing. And so, when the Galactic King summoned me to his crystalline throne and declared he wanted a specimen brought before him, I did not hesitate. To break a human would be trivial. To torture one until it yielded its secrets would be as effortless as plucking wings from an insect. The king spoke with his usual gravitas, every syllable echoing across the chamber. "Bring me a human," he commanded, his crown glowing like a captured sun. "I wish to see how quickly they collapse under pressure. One will suffice." A single drop reveals the ocean. His courtiers nodded, murmuring approval, as though he had just uttered the greatest truth in the universe. I bowed deeply, masking my private amusement. If his radiance wanted a human, he would have one. It would take minutes to shatter her mind, and then we would return to worthier pursuits. I left the throne chamber already composing my report in my mind. Brief, efficient, dismissive. Our algorithms scoured the surface of Earth and soon located an appropriate subject. Isolated, young, and alone by a riverside, she was the very image of vulnerability. She knelt by the water, scooping stones into a crude container, humming without concern for predators or surveillance. Her dress, yellow and patterned with flowers, was flimsy protection against the damp ground. My subordinates expressed uncertainty. Why not seize a soldier, a leader, someone of influence? I silenced them with a gesture. "It makes no difference," I said. "They are all the same." Our ship descended, the paralysis beam struck, and she stiffened instantly, frozen in place. No scream, no plea. I noted her stillness with satisfaction. Even when captured, humans appear docile. We carried her aboard and bound her to the examination dais. Energy bands locked across her arms and legs, ensuring even the strongest resistance would be futile. I began dictating my notes into the recorder, my tone dry and mocking. Subject secured. Compliance assumed. Yielding expected within minutes. Once finished, disposal will be uncomplicated. My team chuckled, though I noticed their eyes lingered on her longer than expected. Some part of them was uneasy, though none dared admit it. I ignored their hesitation. A leader must project confidence, and confidence came easily when facing such pitiful prey. While calibrating the scanners, I reviewed Earth's culture once more, indulging myself in ridicule. These humans spent astonishing amounts of energy recording themselves dancing in kitchens, shouting at one another in stage competitions, and following the antics of a family whose fame seemed to rest solely on its own existence. Their so-called news was filled with tales of Florida man, an individual whose absurd misfortunes seemed endless. At first I assumed he was unique, until further research revealed he was simply representative. If this was the measure of their society, then surely their downfall was inevitable. Still, certain contradictions troubled me. They had reached their moon, yet retreated into frivolity. They had built global communication networks, yet used them primarily to argue about soft drinks. They had unleashed nuclear fire, but continued to cook food in small metal boxes that sometimes exploded. Primitive, yes, but strangely unpredictable. I dismissed the thought and turned my attention to the specimen. Her eyes were open now, watching me with unnerving clarity. I expected fear, pleading, perhaps tears. Instead, her gaze was steady, measuring, as though she were the one recording observations. I felt irritation stir. Prey should not look at predators in such a way. I leaned closer, narrowing my own eyes, and dictated again for the log. Subject conscious earlier than expected. Irrelevant. Submission still certain. My voice was sharp with disdain, but privately I wondered why the paralysis had weakened so soon. The king's voice thundered through the chamber once more, transmitted from his throne. "Begin the testing. I expect results quickly." His command was not a suggestion. I signaled to my team, and the first neural probes descended toward her temples, glowing with calibrated energy. Pain levels were set to a fraction of what was possible, merely enough to shatter resistance. We waited for the inevitable reaction, the scream, the pleading, the collapse. I watched her lips closely, anticipating the trembling of despair. What I saw instead unsettled me more than any sound could have. Her lips curved, slowly and deliberately, until they formed a smile. Not a nervous twitch, not an accidental grimace, but a true, measured smile. Teeth bared, eyes steady, expression calm. She looked directly at me, and she smiled. My claws clenched involuntarily. Around me, the chamber fell silent, every subordinate staring, their confidence wavering. I wanted to mock her, to dismiss it as meaningless, but the words did not come easily. Why was she smiling? The probes pressed closer, energy humming. Her expression did not change. If anything, the smile widened, carrying with it a weight of knowledge I could not define. She was supposed to be begging, and yet she seemed amused, as though she knew something I did not. A chill I had never felt in my long service crept into my chest. For the first time, I hesitated before giving the next order. And in that hesitation, the certainty of our superiority faltered. Her smile was an insult, yet somehow it was worse than screams. Screams confirm superiority. Screams are music, proof of control, reassurance that one's methods work. But silence laced with amusement? That was dissonance. It was as though a cage door had swung open while I was still congratulating myself on the lock. My team shifted uncomfortably, glancing between her and me. I could feel their uncertainty spreading like mold. If I allowed it to fester, discipline would fray. I straightened, drew myself to full height, and spoke with exaggerated clarity. "Do not be deceived," I declared. "This is the last performance of a cornered animal. Amusement before inevitable collapse." The words sounded convincing enough, yet even as I said them, I heard the brittle edge beneath. The probes made contact, humming softly as they sank signals into her neural pathways. She should have convulsed. Instead, she inhaled, steady and measured, and then, "This still grates upon every fiber of my being," she spoke. Calm, conversational, as though she were not pinned beneath alien machinery in the presence of an emperor's court. "So," she said, her voice level, "you're the scientist." Every sound in the chamber ceased. No one had spoken during a probe sequence before. No one could. Yet her words were sharp, undeniable, perfectly enunciated. She looked at me, not with terror, but with a peculiar knowing, as though she had cataloged my entire existence in a single glance. "You've got the tools. They've got the crowns," she continued, eyes flicking toward the king's massive projection. "You do the dirty work, they applaud. Fair trade, I guess." I bristled. She was analyzing us as though we were the specimens. My mandibles clicked before I could stop them, an instinctive tick of agitation. I forced composure and snapped. "You will answer questions, not ask them." But even as I spoke, my hands faltered on the controls. She should have been writhing. Instead, she was speaking calmly, deliberately, choosing words like scalpels. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing with amusement. "Relax," she said. "I'm not here to cause trouble." Yet, that single word, "yet," spread unease among my subordinates. I caught one glance nervously at the console, another adjusting his stance as though preparing for flight. I wanted to chastise them, but my own unease kept me silent. The king's projection leaned forward, his vast face filling the chamber. "Continue," he ordered. "Push harder. I want this creature's secrets revealed." His voice boomed absolute. I increased the probe intensity. Again, I expected pain. Again, she did not yield. Instead, she chuckled. Yes, chuckled, as though enduring this were no more taxing than standing in rain. "Do you even know what this machine of yours does?" she asked. I snapped back. "It dissects thought. It reveals truth." Her eyes gleamed, disturbingly bright. "Funny," she said softly, "because while you're scanning me, I've been scanning you." The words hit harder than any weapon. For a moment, I did not even comprehend them. My subordinates muttered in confusion, shifting uneasily. I tried to dismiss it, to laugh, but no sound came. She leaned into the glow of the probes, letting them illuminate her features. During your little abduction beam, she said, I was awake. Couldn't move, sure, but awake. I saw your systems, your frequencies, your calibration errors. Did you know your left stabilizer leaks field energy? Sloppy. She shook her head lightly, still smiling. I felt the chamber's confidence collapse like a breached hull. My assistants whispered nervously, checking their instruments, as though expecting her words to be proven true. I slammed my hand against the console, silencing them. Lies, I snapped louder than intended. Delusions of a primitive mind under stress. But my voice cracked on the last syllable. She looked directly at me, unblinking. You got hierarchy, I'll give you that. King at the top, then you, then your little minions. But do you know what hierarchy really is? Predictable. Predictable means exploitable. Her calmness was suffocating. She leaned back against the restraints, utterly comfortable despite the glowing arcs crawling across her skin. Want to know the funny part? While you're trying to map me, I've already mapped you. A shiver passed down my spine. It was absurd, impossible, and yet the certainty in her voice was unshakable. My mind scrambled to dismiss it with logic, but logic faltered against confidence this absolute. I forced myself to speak. And what do you imagine you will do with such knowledge? She smiled wider. Depends how long your systems take to notice. I'd say you've got, 15 minutes before they realize something's wrong. The king's face loomed, voice thunderous. Enough games. Extract her memory at full force. Break her if necessary. His words snapped like whips, commanding obedience. I obeyed mechanically, fingers inputting commands, but my thoughts were elsewhere. Her calm prediction of time gnawed at me. 15 minutes. Why 15? Why not instantly, or an hour? Why something so precise? The probes surged to full capacity. Light bathed her skull, energy arcs sparking across the restraints. This was power enough to unravel any brain. Yet her smile did not vanish. Her body did not collapse. Instead, she looked around the chamber, eyes resting deliberately on each of my subordinates. You, she said, addressing one by name. He flinched, though I had not heard her speak his name before. You like to reroute diagnostics when no one's watching. You missed something important last week. He stumbled back, trembling. Another she addressed directly, citing a secret infraction in maintenance. Each revelation struck with precision. She was dismantling my crew one by one, stripping them of composure. They looked at me for answers, but I had none. She should not know these things. She could not know these things. I barked, silence her. But even as the words left my mouth, the lights above flickered. For the first time in decades of service, our systems wavered mid-procedure. The chamber dimmed, then recovered, but the unease lingered like smoke. She tilted her head toward the ceiling, still smiling. Right on time, she murmured. My claws tightened on the console. The words replayed in my mind. 15 minutes. She had predicted this. And if she had predicted this, what else might she have set in motion? I wanted to dismiss it as coincidence, but the air in the chamber had changed. My subordinates were no longer confident servants, but unsettled animals sensing a predator where none should exist. The king barked more commands, demanding escalation, demanding victory, but his booming voice no longer comforted me. I stared at her calm face, the impossible serenity of her expression, and realized with dawning horror that the balance of control was slipping. And then she whispered, so softly I almost doubted it was real. I told you. I've already sent the message. Her words clung to the air like toxins. I've already sent the message. I try to dismiss them, try to file them into the category of human exaggeration, like their belief that cats understand sarcasm or that a man named Chuck Norris could defeat armies with a glance. Yet the precision of her tone made it impossible to ignore. She did not say she would send a message. She said she already had. The past tense. Accomplished. Finished. My claws hovered over the console, unwilling to strike more commands. The king thundered in outrage, his vast face rippling with fury across the projection screen. "She lies," he bellowed. "Increase the intensity. Break her." His commands shook the chamber, but for the first time, I noticed the faintest tremor of uncertainty in even his voice. A king is absolute. A king is infallible. Yet he was shouting, as though volume could replace certainty. I turned back to her. Her body glowed faintly under the probes, energy crackling against her skin. Any other human would have been screaming incoherently, begging for release, perhaps already reduced to lifelessness. But she leaned into the restraints as though testing them for comfort. 15 minutes, she said again, softly, calmly, a teacher repeating a lesson for dull students. One of my subordinates whispered, "Systems are fluctuating." His claws tapped nervously at his console. I glared, ready to lash out, but then the lights flickered overhead, dimmed, and returned. A simple fluctuation, yes, but timed precisely with her prediction. I felt the hairs along my carapace stiffen. Coincidence was a word cowards clung to before they admitted defeat. I forced myself to speak with authority. "Explain yourself, human." "What message? To whom?" My voice was steadier than I felt. Her smile widened, but she gave no direct answer. Instead, she tilted her head, studying me with that same unnerving composure. "You're asking the wrong questions," she said. "Not who I sent it to. Ask yourself what you've already revealed." The words rattled me. My mind, trained in protocols and hierarchies, scrambled for balance. What had we revealed? She was the prisoner. She was restrained, probed, dissected. And yet, in her presence, I felt uncomfortably exposed. The king roared again, demanding escalation. Against my better instincts, I obeyed, increasing the probes to full capacity. Energy surged, filling the chamber with a crackle of burning ozone. She inhaled sharply. Finally, I thought, pain has broken through. But no, she exhaled slowly, deliberately, and spoke through the arcs of light. "Stronger than you thought, aren't we?" I slammed a claw against the console. "You are nothing but a primitive bipedal animal, clinging to a rock polluted with your own excesses." My voice echoed with forced conviction. I needed her to break, not for science, not for the king, but for myself. If she did not, then every certainty I had ever known was at risk. But she only smiled again. Animals adapt, sometimes faster than empires. The chamber grew colder. My subordinates exchanged uneasy looks. They were no longer mocking the specimen. They were watching her as one watches an oncoming storm. One muttered about irregular brain skin patterns. Another whispered about uncharted neural responses. I silenced them all with a glare, but the doubt was already seated. Then the first true anomaly struck. The central console flickered and displayed a cascade of symbols not in our language. At first, I thought it was malfunction. Then the realization struck. She had done this. Somehow, impossibly, through the probes meant to dissect her, she was feeding information back. My claws froze over the keys, unwilling to touch them. "What is this?" the king demanded, his voice strained with fury. She answered for me. "That's a mirror," she said. "You wanted to map me. Instead, I mapped you. Every pathway, every weak point, every redundancy that isn't redundant at all." Her eyes glowed in the flickering light. "You built your ship like a hierarchy too, and hierarchies collapse when you cut out the middle." The lights dimmed again, longer this time, then surged back. Consoles beeped warnings in shrill, overlapping tones. My subordinates scrambled, panic spreading. I wanted to shout at them, but my throat felt tight. She had done this with nothing but her mind, her calm, her unbearable confidence. I leaned closer despite myself, whispering harshly, "What are you?" She smiled as though I had asked a child's question. "Prepared. Prepared." The word struck harder than any blade. It implied foresight, intention, inevitability. She had come to this encounter knowing it would happen, perhaps even planning it. My thoughts spiraled. How could that be? Unless humanity was not what we believed. Unless every assumption we had made about their weakness was deliberate theater. The king roared again, though his voice no longer carried unquestionable authority. "Contain this. Shut her down. Sever the connection. His face, massive on the screen, seemed to waver, as though even the transmission was compromised. My claws scrambled across controls, but each input met resistance. Systems that should have responded instantly now lagged or displayed incomprehensible patterns. She was in them. Somehow, she was in them. Her voice cut through the panic, calm as ever. "You think you chose me? That's cute. But really, I chose you." I recoiled as though struck. The implication gnawed at me. Had she allowed herself to be taken? Had she known we were watching, waiting? The arrogance that once fueled me now twisted into dread. The chamber alarms began to blare. Power fluctuations rippled through the ship. My subordinates abandoned composure entirely, shouting diagnostics, contradicting one another, pleading for orders. I barked commands, but even to my own ears they sounded hollow. I was no longer in control. She was. And then, with perfect timing, the lights cut out completely. Darkness swallowed the chamber. Only her faintly glowing eyes and the pale smile remained visible. Her voice emerged from the void, quiet yet undeniable. And that, she whispered, was minute 15. Darkness was not supposed to exist on our ship. Every corridor, every chamber, every conduit was designed to glow faintly with efficient luminescence, a symbol of control and order. Yet in that moment, the chamber plunged into void. Only the faint, eerie glow of her eyes and the sharp white curve of her smile remained visible. My subordinates froze. The alarms had died mid-scream. Consoles went blank. Even the great king's projection had sputtered out, his thunderous commands replaced by silence. The only sound was the measured, steady breath of the human girl who should have been broken, but was instead ascendant. I reached for manual overrides, claws scraping across panels that no longer responded. Emergency backups, redundancies, even the isolated circuits, nothing stirred. She had hollowed us from the inside, and we stood paralyzed, powerless. I whispered into the void, "What have you done?" My words tasted like ash, stripped of authority. Her voice emerged, calm and cutting. "Nothing you didn't invite. You wanted to dissect my mind." I simply reversed the flow. Her restraints, still glowing faintly, flickered once and then disengaged. She stood slowly, stretching, as though waking from a nap instead of surviving torment that should have destroyed her nervous system. My subordinates backed away, their composure shattered, some even dropping their instruments. Trained soldiers of the Empire, reduced to trembling children by a single unarmed human. The king's projection sputtered back to life for a flickering instant. His immense face loomed, distorted by interference. "Control your specimen," he bellowed, though his voice cracked with static, robbed of its terrifying weight. I turned toward him, helpless, words failing me for the first time in my service. The girl glanced at the projection and tilted her head. "King, is it?" Funny thing about kings, they only rule if others agree to play along. With that, the image shattered completely, leaving us alone with her. She stepped off the dais. Her movements were unhurried, casual, but in that casualness lay absolute dominance. "You came here thinking we were weak," she said, addressing not just me, but the entire chamber, perhaps the entire empire. "You thought duct tape and sitcoms defined us. You thought reality TV was our reality. But you never asked why a species so self-destructive still survives." Her words cut deeper than any blade. My mind scrambled to deny, to rationalize, to cling to the arrogance that had once shielded me. But even as I tried, the ship trembled. Systems rebooted without our input. Doors sealed of their own accord. Lights flickered back, but no longer in steady, imperial patterns. Instead, they pulsed with alien rhythms, her rhythms. One of my subordinates broke down entirely, dropping to his knees, mandibles clacking in prayer to gods who would not answer. Another tried to lunge at her with a sidearm, but the weapon locked mid-aim, frozen by the very systems it relied upon. She glanced at him, eyes filled not with anger, but with faint disappointment, and the gun dissolved into useless components in his hands. I forced myself to speak, though my throat ached with the effort. "What do you want?" The words tasted foreign, humiliating. I had never asked a specimen such a question before. I had always demanded, commanded, dictated. But here I was, reduced to pleading. She considered the question, then smiled faintly. Not much. Just for you to understand. She walked slowly around the chamber, her bare feet silent against the metallic floor, pausing to glance at each of my subordinates. None dared meet her gaze. You've spent centuries convincing yourselves you're superior. You dissect, you conquer, you laugh. And maybe most of the time you're right. But every empire forgets one thing. The smallest anomaly can undo the largest structure. She stopped in front of me, standing close enough that I could see every detail of her face, every fleck of light in her eyes. You thought I would break, she said softly. Instead, you did. My mandibles trembled. I wanted to look away, but I could not. The arrogance that had defined me cracked completely. For the first time, I saw us as she saw us. Not as gods of order, but as brittle creatures hiding behind crowns and protocols, terrified of losing control. The ship shuddered again, harder this time. Somewhere deep in its core, engines shut down, leaving us adrift. She did not flinch. She turned her gaze upward, as though listening to something beyond our comprehension. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "They'll be here soon." A chill pierced me. They? I managed to croak. Her smile returned, gentle and merciless. You'll find out. And with that, she closed her eyes. For a terrible moment, I thought she might collapse. Instead, light rippled across her skin, not the harsh glow of our probes, but something organic, radiant. The chamber filled with a low hum, a vibration that sank into the marrow of my bones. Consoles lit up with symbols we could not decipher. Doors opened and sealed in incomprehensible patterns. It was as though the ship itself no longer belonged to us, but to her. My subordinates panicked, shouting, some trying to flee, others frozen in place. I could do nothing but watch. For all my training, all my intellect, all my arrogance, I was reduced to silent witness. She opened her eyes again, and they glowed. You thought Earth was unguarded, she said. You thought we were asleep. But we've been watching, preparing, waiting. I felt my knees weaken. My body, once a vessel of pride, now trembled with the weight of fear. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. You're not the first empire to try. You won't be the last. But remember this, we smile before the storm. And then she turned away, leaving me broken, leaving us all broken. The chamber lights pulsed once more, and in the distance, I thought I saw the faint glimmer of shapes approaching through the void. Shapes not ours, shapes cloaked in secrecy until this very moment. My mind raced with implications too vast to contain. Humanity was not primitive. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was the storm. I, once arrogant beyond measure, could only whisper into the silence she left behind. We thought them fragile. We thought them foolish. We thought them ours. We were wrong.